They didn't follow these rules. They just had a lot of money. They knew Pittsburgh was very inexpensive. You could buy a lot here for very little. And that got them into trouble. And now, like I said, all I'm seeing is these hedge funds selling everything and taking massive losses. Hello, everyone. It's Alex Deacon. Today's topic, we're going to talk about why the BRRRR method does not always work. And it's very true. And it's nothing that you haven't heard before. What I'm going to go over today is basically the fundamentals. But what prompted this was, there's been a lot of buzz about Pittsburgh and other markets across the country that the prices are really low, right? It's affordable. So we have these hedge funds, and they're coming in from, let's pick on, again, New York and the stock market and Wall Street, and they're getting just a boatload of money together from other investors. I assume this is how it's working. I don't know how else it would. They're coming here and buying 10, 15 houses a month. And I'm looking at this for 5 or 10 years. I'm like, what? How is this working for them? Because they're paying 80,000, for example, they're paying 80,000 for a house that I would pay 50 for, maybe 60. A big difference. That's, 20, 30, 40% difference. And I'm like, what are they doing that I'm not? I don't quite understand it. And now my thought was, they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's a house of cards. And it's exactly what it was. And right now, with the economy the way it is and inflation the way it is, and it's collapsing. I mean, that's all I see on the market right now. Not a lot of people are selling their homes right now because of inflation. It's like, where are we going to go? If we put our house on the market, we got to go buy a house that's we can't even afford. So we're just going to stay. So inventory is very low. I'm seeing a lot of these investors that came from out of state and hedge funds, their houses are all on the market. And some of them, for example, like this one here, see what they had paid $75,000 for this in 2020. So it's right now, that was about 2.5 years ago. Okay. They paid $75,000 for it. Right now it's on the market for $67,000. And it's hammered. I looked at pictures of it. They bought it for 75. They put some money into it, maybe 10,000 or so. So 85. They got holding costs. They got cost to buy, so on and so forth. They're selling for 67. Maybe they'll get 60. I don't know. Minus closing costs, minus the cost to hold it. It's sitting vacant. They'll lose maybe 50,000, 40,000, 35,000 on one house. Multiply that times 300 houses. Ouch. I'm seeing this every day. So the BRRRR method will work, but it doesn't work if you don't follow the fundamentals. And those are, as always, price. Number one. Price, a broker of mine who I started with when I first got my license, he said, price is the ultimate amenity. It's not the view of the ocean. It's not this, it's not that. It's the price. You can buy, if the price is right, the house, the investment will make sense regardless of the location. Price is the ultimate amenity. Now, the rest of it adds value: view of the city, view of the ocean, location, proximity to things, so on and so forth. So make sure you're paying the right price. How do you do that? You got to raise your real estate IQ, educate yourself. You have to get good at that. Calculating the proper repair costs. I'll tell you a quick story. We had an owner from Mace Property Management came over and said, hey, I want you to manage my property. They were referred by another agent. I said, sure. It looked like a nice house. I could tell right away he overpaid. I didn't want to say that. It's not my place, but I know he overpaid for it. He did all the work himself. Him and his dad, they came in from out of state and they did the work and then they left. So I sent our property manager over there, and there's paint splattered everywhere. There's just, everything was done poorly. And then there's trash left around. That wasn't cleaned. And he wanted top of the mark rent, like $1,400 on something that's probably going to rent for $1,100. We reached out to him because, well, you could start showing it and then maybe we'll get a tenant and then I'll finish that stuff or whatever. Like, no, you can't do business like that. We don't do business like that. I can see that your vision and our vision and is not going to work. I basically let him out of his contract. I can't help someone who's not doing the work properly. So the reason I say that story is because make sure you calculate the proper repair costs, and then make sure you do the work somewhat quality. You make sure you're doing the work correctly and you're paying someone fairly. What we're forgetting, a lot of investors is, and I do it every time, I swear, on every project, I'm under budgeting and I'm over budget at the end. It never fails. I'm always positive, and I see things with rose colored glasses on, and it's a $60,000 rehab. It ends up $75,000. Throughout the industry, people do it all the time. So if you're good at budgeting, you shouldn't be over every time, but make sure you try to get as good as you can on that. Account for proper vacancy. You know, you're never going to be fully occupied. Account for a vacancy, account for a management fee. Even if you're self-managing, just throw that in there, throw a certain percentage in there. Account for major repairs like roofs, furnaces, sewer lines, things like that. You know, like a roof will last 20 years. Well, a roof is $10,000. That means you set aside maybe $500 a year for a roof, which is $42 a month, so to speak, right? I mean, account for that, and account for your regular repairs, your apartment turnover, use the fair vacancy rate, management fee, account for everything that will affect your cash flow. So at the end of the day, you have a realistic number. Account for inflation. We've had nothing but good times until now, and inflation has just, I mean, like any repair, I swear, is 20, 30, 40% more than it was 3 years ago. You know, everything's gone up. So you have to somehow account for that. Hire or get to know, again, this is building your team. These are the fundamentals. Get to know a good mentor, someone who's successful at what you want to do, a good property manager, a good agent to ask them questions. And you have to take all that information that they give you and make an educated decision for yourself. But if you're bringing in information from an agent that doesn't really care about you and just looking for the commission, and a property manager that doesn't really know the market, and a mentor who you think is successful who really isn't, you're getting 3 pieces of bad information. Therefore, what are you going to make? You're going to make a really bad decision. So how do you find those people? You're going to have to put a lot of time and effort into it, research, and then go with your gut at some point. But just don't pick the first person. You know, just that's really important. That team, those consultants, make sure they are the right people. Assess the proper rent. You'll get that from help from your team. But also, you know, if you look online, just don't go with anything you see online. Oh, here's the rent estimate. It says right here. That's not always right. In fact, it's never right. It's very rarely right on. In fact, nobody knows exactly what the rent will be, but you'll get a range. And I always start a little bit on the higher side. And then if I'm not getting any action, I drop it in a week, drop it again, drop that rent. I want that apartment rented. I don't want it sitting vacant just because, I mean, I have owners that literally want, instead of $1,300, they want $1,375, and they're sitting firm at that. I had one recently where we had a really good applicant. They wanted to pay $1,250. This property has been sitting vacant for like 4 months, and they wouldn't take it. And what did that cost them? Do the math. It's real simple math. So be cognizant of what the rental market is telling you and what the proper rents are. And you can't always raise rent. I don't know if I referred to this before, but you can raise rent every year. There's inflation, raise the rent. But sometimes, you know, like right now, we're seeing rents coming down a little bit. At least I am. I'm getting so much different input from other investors and other property managers, but I'm personally seeing rents come down a little bit. Okay. You have to be aware of that. And you can't always raise rents, because if you go too much, you're going to start losing tenants and you'll get turnover. So you have to be like, have your finger on the pulse of how much you can raise the rent each year to be fair to your tenants and to not lose tenants. And ultimately it's going to cost you more money, because turnover costs money. vacant apartments cost you money just so you can get an extra $100 a month when maybe you should only raise the rent 25, or maybe you shouldn't have raised it at all this year. That's a fine line, and you have to make that decision, but it's not always raise rent, raise rent, raise rent, because that's what a lot of these hedge funds, that's how they, I think, attracted all these investors, because this was the investment, and then we raised the rent this year. At end of 5 years, their return on investment was huge, and that collapsed because they didn't follow these rules. They just had a lot of money. They knew Pittsburgh was very inexpensive. You could buy a lot here for very little, and that got them into trouble. And now, like I said, all I'm seeing is these hedge funds selling everything and taking massive losses. Knowing that, so the BRRRR method is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, then you rinse and repeat, right? Buy it at the right price, rehab it, do the proper rehab, make sure you get what needs to get done. Don't overspend, but don't underspend. Rent it, make sure you find the right team, you rent it at the right price, use realistic numbers. Then you're going to refinance it. Okay, so refinance is, an appraisal is not what the market value is. An appraisal is one person's opinion, an appraiser, and they typically come in somewhere close to where they need to be. That's just the way it works between appraisers and banks, and it's kind of just the way it works. But understand, it's one person's opinion. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the market value. I don't know how many times I've gotten appraisals that were much higher than the property's worth. I know that, but it worked for me. The appraisal came in high. I was able to cash out my money, even, get all my money back, sometimes even cash out. That's okay to do that as long as it makes sense and you're still financially making money and you're not over leveraging. It's one person's opinion. Maybe now if you got 3 independent appraisals, meaning the bank wasn't involved, and you wanted to spend $1,500 on a single family home, 5, 5, and 5, and get 3 appraisals, you'd probably have really close idea of the market value because you take maybe the middle, the average of those 3. But no one's ever going to do that. You just have to be cognizant of values and understand that appraisals aren't the end all, and it's one person's opinion. And just be smart. Don't jump in and buy because everyone else is buying. Warren Buffett says when buyers are flocking to the stock market and buying, that's when you should sit back. When they're not buying, that's probably when you should be buying. Now, that's a rule of thumb. That's from probably one of the greatest investors of all time. You got to kind of listen to him, and you could take that to the real estate sales, purchasing real estate, similar as stock. I'm assuming that. I don't buy stocks, but you timing, buying at the right price. When people were flooding the market, that's probably when you should pull back. So like last year, I sold some properties. Last 3 years or so, I sold about 4 to 6 properties because the market was great and the timing was right for me, and it just made sense. Now I'm more purchasing because people are getting out, but I'm still careful. You have to be careful even when people are getting out of the market, because the market's crazy right now. The inflation is going up. I don't know where, if our dollar is going to collapse and all that stuff. You can't control that, so you can't be too concerned with it, but you just have to be careful and just not buy everything because the prices are right. You have to look at other variables. I know the BRRRR method works, but I also know it doesn't work. If any of these ingredients aren't in there and you're doing things incorrectly, it's not going to work for you. So be careful, think it through, get a good team, take your time, get really good at buying 1, then buying 2, stay in your lane, become really good and focused at it, and then you can start ramping it up and buying more and more and more. I want to see you all succeed. I learn more every time I do these podcasts because it reinforces me to do the fundamentals and stick to the basics, because everybody wants to jump on the next easy train, and there is no easy train. So I wish you the best of luck. If you ever need me, you can always send me an email, alex@alexdeacon.com. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I look forward to talking with you, and have a good day.